Officer Lena stood perfectly still. The air in the interrogation room felt like ice. Across from her sat the most dangerous man in the city. He didn't have handcuffs on. He didn't need them. He owned the streets, the judges, and some whispered, the very precinct Lena worked in. Most criminals shout. They threaten, they lie. But this man, he just leaned closer, his expensive suit crinkling in the silence. Then he whispered the favor. We don't hear the words, but we see the aftermath. Lena's face turned pale in a split second. Her eyes widened, her breath hitched in her throat, and she took a sharp step back, as if she'd been struck. "No," she gasped. "I won't do that." The Mafia boss didn't move. He didn't get angry. Instead, he slowly curled his lips into a smile, the kind of smile a predator gives when it knows the trap is already shut. "Think carefully, officer," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "You already started." Lena froze. Her mind raced. Started what? Before she could demand an answer, he stood up. With total calm, he walked out of the room like he was leaving a coffee shop, leaving Lena alone with a heart that felt like a hammer against her ribs. Lena was famous in the department for one thing. She never broke the law. Not for a bribe, not for a friend, not once. But this man never made useless requests. He was a master of chess, and Lena realized with a jolt of terror that she might already be a pawn on his board. That night, the precinct felt wrong. The shadows seemed longer. When Lena reached her desk, her stomach dropped. A high-profile case file was gone. The witness she had interviewed that morning vanished. Even the security footage for the last hour had been wiped clean. She was alone in the office, whispering to the empty walls. What did he mean? I already started.
Suddenly, her phone buzzed on the desk. It was a message from an unknown number. Just 3 words that made her blood run cold. Check your locker. What do you think is waiting for her behind that metal door? If you were Lena, would you open it, or would you run while you still could?
Lena didn't want to go. Her survival instinct told her to turn around, walk out of the precinct, and never look back. But she couldn't ignore the message. It was like a fishing line hooked deep in her chest, pulling her toward the locker room. She walked slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last, the sound of her boots echoing off the walls. Usually the night shift was buzzing with the sound of radios and distant phones, but tonight the hallway was empty. It was too empty, as if the world had cleared a path for her to meet her fate. When she reached her locker, her hand hovered over the cold metal handle. With a deep breath, she pulled it open. Inside, there was no bomb, no weapon, just a small, plain envelope. There was no name and no mark on the outside. Her hands shook as she tore the seal. As she pulled out the contents, her heart didn't just race, it dropped into the pit of her stomach. They were photos of her. The images showed Lena at a crime scene from 2 nights ago. But the reality in the pictures was a lie. In the photos, it looked like she was helping a suspect escape, moving evidence, and acting as a lookout. She remembered that night clearly. She had been there to secure the perimeter, not to sabotage it. "This is fake," she whispered, her breath coming in fast, jagged gasps. But as she stared at the high-resolution prints, a terrifying thought took hold. It didn't look fake. It looked real. Too real. Her phone buzzed again. The same unknown number flashed on the screen. "Now you understand," the message read. Lena spun around, her hand instinctively reaching for her holster. At the far end of the long, dim hallway, a figure stood in the shadows. It was him. The Mafia boss was watching her, his posture calm and patient, as if he had all the time in the world. "I told you," he said, his voice carrying easily through the silence. You already started. I never did any of this, Lena shouted, her voice cracking with desperation. The man tilted his head slightly, almost like he felt sorry for her. Then prove it, he challenged softly.
Lena realized then that the walls were closing in. Evidence was turning against her. Someone was rewriting her history. And even though she never agreed to a deal, the world would see her as a traitor. Her voice dropped to a broken whisper. What do you want from me? Lena is trapped between a lie that looks like the truth and a man who holds all the cards. Would you stay and fight to clear your name, or would you take the envelope and run?
Lena didn't go home. She couldn't sleep, not while her entire life was being rewritten by an invisible hand. She spent the rest of the night hunched over her computer in the precinct, running checks through every system she had access to. She scanned the digital logs, the security archives, and the official reports. What she found made a wave of nausea roll through her stomach. The system, the very heart of the law she protected, was lying. According to the digital records, Officer Lena had signed a high-level legal document she had never even touched. She had approved a massive evidence transfer she had never seen. Most damning of all, the records showed she had personally cleared a dangerous suspect she had never met.
It was all under her name. It was recorded, time-stamped, and looked completely real. "This is impossible," she whispered to the empty room, her voice trembling. But the data on the screen didn't care about the truth. It only cared about the trail. Someone powerful had access to everything, and they were using it to bury her alive. Morning came far too fast. The sun hadn't even fully cleared the horizon when the heavy doors of the precinct swung open. 3 officers from Internal Affairs walked in. They didn't have the usual morning coffee in their hands. Their faces were like stone, their expressions serious and cold. They walked straight to Lena's desk. "Officer Lena," the lead investigator said, his voice echoing in the quiet office, "we need you to come with us." Lena's stomach dropped as if she were in a falling elevator. "Why?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. The investigator looked her straight in the eyes, showing no emotion. "You're being investigated for misconduct." Lena felt her world starting to close in. Everything was happening too fast, too perfectly, and with a terrifying level of precision. The very system Lena spent her life serving has now become her executioner. If the evidence says you're guilty, but your heart knows you're innocent, who will the world believe?
The atmosphere was suffocating. Lena sat in a cold, windowless room, the hum of a flickering fluorescent light the only sound in the silence. Across from her, the Internal Affairs officers watched her every move, their eyes searching for a crack in her composure. "Explain the documents, Lena," one officer demanded, sliding a folder across the metal table. "I didn't sign them," Lena replied, her voice steady despite the chaos screaming in her head. "Then how is your name on all of them?" She had no answer. For hours, she endured the same cycle: questions, silence, and mounting pressure. She was a decorated officer, yet they were looking at her like a common criminal. Then her phone buzzed on the table. The officers, perhaps hoping she would lead them to a co-conspirator, actually let her check it. It was a big mistake. The message was brief and chilling. "Say nothing. Walk out in 60 seconds. Lena's heart pounded against her ribs like a trapped bird. Was this a trick to make her look guilty? Or was it her only way out of a trap that was already locked? 59, 58. The officer leaned forward, his voice softening into a fake kindness. "We can help you, Lena, if you tell us the truth." 47, 46. Lena's hands tightened under the table. She looked at the clock. 30 seconds. She stood up abruptly, the chair screeching against the floor. "I want a lawyer." The room went deathly still.
The officers exchanged frustrated looks. Without a statement, their hold on her was weak. One of them finally sighed, checking his watch. "Fine, you're free to go. For now." Lena walked out slowly, maintaining a mask of calm. But inside, she was shaking with a terror she had never known. That message had just saved her, but it also proved she was now under the protection and the thumb of the city's most dangerous man. As she stepped outside the building, she saw it. A sleek black car waiting at the curb. The engine was humming, and the back door was slightly ajar, inviting her in. Her phone buzzed one last time. Get in. Lena stopped. Every instinct told her to run, to scream, to disappear. But she looked around and saw nothing. No officers, no help, and no way out of the web. She stepped closer to the car and opened the door. The moment Lena sat down, the door locked automatically. She is no longer an officer. She's a passenger in a journey she didn't choose. Be honest, would you have gotten into that car, or would you have stayed and faced the cell? The moment Lena sat down, the door locked automatically. The car moved fast, weaving through the city streets with a precision that felt robotic. There was no driver in sight, and the windows were tinted so dark that the world outside became a blur of gray shadows. Lena was trapped in a moving metal box, her fate being steered by someone she couldn't see. She clenched her jaw, her voice low and dangerous despite the trembling in her hands. "You're setting me up," she whispered into the silence. Suddenly, a speaker crackled to life, and his voice filled the cabin. Calm, steady, and terrifyingly in control. "No," the Mafia boss replied. "I'm guiding you." Lena's frustration boiled over. "Then say it! What do you want?" she demanded. There was a long, agonizing pause. Then the voice returned with a finality that made her skin crawl. "You'll know when it matters." The car eventually came to a smooth stop in a part of the city Lena didn't recognize. The doors unlocked with a sharp click. "Step out," the voice commanded. Lena stepped onto an empty street lined with decaying old buildings. There were no people, no traffic, and no witnesses. Just a single small shop ahead with its lights humming and the front door standing wide open. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A new message appeared. "Go inside." Lena hesitated, looking back at the car, but she remembered the fake photos, the deleted evidence, and the massive case building against her. She realized she was no longer walking her own path. She was walking his. She stepped into the shop. Behind the counter stood a man who looked like he had seen a ghost. He was sweating, his hands shaking as he gripped the edge of the register. The moment he saw Lena's face, his eyes went wide with pure, unadulterated fear. "You," he whispered, his voice cracking. "You're not supposed to be here." Lena is staring into the eyes of a man who is terrified of her, yet she has no idea why. Would you demand answers right then and there, or would you wait to see what he's hiding under the counter?
Lena stared at the envelope the man pushed toward her. Her hands felt heavy, like opening it would change her life forever. Her phone buzzed with a direct command. "Open it." She slowly tore the paper. Inside was a single photo. Her breath caught in her throat. The picture showed a woman tied to a chair and blindfolded. She was alive, but clearly in a nightmare. Who is she? Lena's voice shook. The reply from the unknown number came fast. "Focus." Lena turned the photo over and found a single line of text. "You saw her before." Her mind raced through faces and files. Then it hit her. 2 days ago at the station, a quiet woman had been sitting alone, waiting. Lena had walked right past her without stopping to ask questions. Now, that woman was in mortal danger.
"You want me to find her," Lena said to the empty shop. The phone screen lit up. too late for that. "Then what is this?" Lena cried out, her chest tightening. There was no answer. Suddenly, the sound of sirens filled the air, getting louder and closer by the second. Lena ran to the window and saw police cars screaming toward the building. She turned back to the counter, but the shop was empty. The nervous man was gone, leaving no trace behind, except for Lena and the incriminating photo in her hand. Her phone buzzed one last time. "Now you understand the cost." "No, I don't," Lena whispered. Then a final cold message appeared. "Next step, or she dies." The full favor was still a mystery, but the stakes were finally real. A life was on the line. Lena is holding evidence in a shop surrounded by police, and a woman's life depends on her next move. Should she trust the Mafia boss to lead her to the victim, or try to save the woman her own way?
"Drop it! Hands up!" The command shattered the silence as police officers rushed into the small shop, their guns raised and flashlights cutting through the dim air. Lena froze, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The terrifying photo of the blindfolded woman still gripped in her hand. Her mind raced through the consequences. If the officers saw the photo, if they traced the envelope, every lie and fake record created by the Mafia boss would finally connect back to her. She would be seen as a criminal, a traitor to the badge she had worked so hard to earn. Suddenly, her phone buzzed in her pocket. A single, chilling message appeared on the screen. "Say nothing. Leave now."
"Don't move!" the officer yelled again, his finger twitching near the trigger. Lena's pulse was a deafening roar in her ears. This was the moment that would define her forever. She could follow the law she had sworn to protect, or she could follow the man who was currently holding her life and the life of the woman in the photo hostage. Slowly, Lena began to raise her hands, but then she made a choice that changed everything. She dropped the photo behind the counter and stepped back into the light. "I just got here," she said quickly, her voice sounding far more confident than she felt. "I heard a noise and came to check it out." The officers, recognizing her as one of their own, moved past her with focused intensity. They rushed toward the back room, their attention completely diverted from her. Her lie had worked. Lena walked out of the shop, her steps careful and measured, making sure not to look like a woman fleeing a crime scene. The moment she stepped into the cool night air, she felt a sickening shift in her soul. She had just lied to her colleagues to protect a criminal secret. "I just crossed the line," she whispered to herself, the weight of the betrayal heavy on her shoulders. Her phone buzzed instantly. Good. Lena clenched her fists, her anger flaring. That wasn't the favor, she muttered under her breath. The reply came back before she could even take another step. No, that was the test. Lena stopped dead in her tracks. Everything so far, the photos, the shop, the police, was just a game to see if she would break. Then another message appeared. Now we begin. Lena has officially stepped onto the wrong side of the law. Would you have lied to your fellow officers to save yourself? Or told the truth and risked everything right then?
Lena didn't go home. She couldn't sleep, and the sense of peace she once felt as an officer was completely gone. She sat in her car for hours, staring at nothing, feeling the weight of the line she had just crossed. Her phone buzzed with a new message. The tone was different this time, short and cold. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., Central Station. Lena's breath slowed as she read the words. Central Station was too public and far too risky for someone in her position. "What happens there?" she typed back. But as usual, there was no reply. Morning came with a cruel speed. The station was a sea of noise and movement, packed with people and cameras. Every step Lena took felt like it was being watched by 1,000 eyes. Her phone buzzed again. Locker 27. Her chest tightened as she approached the locker. She opened it and found a uniform and a badge. Neither of them belonged to her. Her fingers shook as she stared at the fake identity. "What is this?" she whispered. The message that followed was slower, as if the Mafia boss wanted her to feel every word. "You wanted to know the favor. Now you're close." Lena looked around the busy station, but no one noticed her. This wasn't a random act. It was a perfectly planned operation. "You want me to pretend to be someone else?" she whispered, the realization hitting her deep in her gut. There was no reply, but she knew she was right. She held the fake badge in her hand and realized that if she put on that uniform, there would be no turning back for her.
Lena is holding a fake life in her hands. One choice will keep her safe, and the other will destroy her career forever. Would you put on that uniform knowing it could be the last thing you ever do as yourself? Lena stood in the cramped locker room, the weight of the fake uniform in front of her feeling like lead. In one hand, she held her real badge, the symbol of everything she had worked for and the person she used to be. In the other, she held a lie. She was trapped between two choices, her identity or the demands of a man who now owned her future. Her phone buzzed with an urgent warning. Time is running out. But the message that followed hit much harder. A photo appeared on her screen, and Lena's breath stopped. It was the same woman from the previous photos, still tied to the chair, but now there was blood.
"Stop, please," Lena whispered, her hands shaking so violently she nearly dropped the phone.
The reply was cold and final. "Next step, or she dies."
Tears filled Lena's eyes as the realization set in that this was no longer a game or a test of loyalty. This was a matter of life and death. Slowly, her spirit breaking under the pressure, Lena reached for the fake uniform. We don't see the transition, but the next moment she walks out into the main hall of the station wearing the disguise. She has made her choice, yet something feels eerily wrong. The station is too quiet, and her movements feel too smooth, as if she is being ushered toward a cliff. As she crossed the floor, a fellow officer stopped and looked at her closely. "Hey," he said slowly, his eyes narrowing. "I haven't seen you before."
Lena's heart nearly stopped. "I'm new," she blurted out, her pulse thundering in her ears. The officer continued to stare, his instincts telling him something wasn't right. Suddenly, his radio exploded with an urgent, loud command. "All units, lock down now!" Alarms began to ring, echoing off the high ceilings as the heavy security doors began to slam shut. Lena's blood ran cold. This wasn't just a simple setup. It was something much bigger and far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Her phone buzzed one last time. Now you see it. You're already inside. Lena is trapped inside a lockdown station wearing a fake badge while the alarms scream around her. She was never meant to just pretend. She was meant to be the key to something terrible. What do you think the real favor is?
The alarm screamed through the corridors, a deafening mechanical wail that signaled a total station lockdown. Doors slammed shut, sealing every exit with heavy metal clicks. Officers rushed in every direction, their faces tight with panic. But in the chaos, no one noticed Lena. She was a ghost in a stolen uniform. Her phone buzzed with one final cold command. "Locker room, now." Lena moved fast, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst from her chest. Every second felt like it could be her last as she pushed open the heavy locker room door. It was empty and silent, the air thick with the smell of old metal and floor wax. "You made it," a voice said behind her. Lena spun around. He was there. The Mafia boss, standing in the middle of the police station as if he belonged there.
"Stop this, please." Lena's voice broke as she looked at him. "Tell me what you want." He stepped closer, showing no rush and no anger. "I already did," he said softly. Lena shook her head in denial, but he leaned in, his voice a low whisper that finally revealed the truth. "All I asked
was for you to open the door." Lena froze. "What?" she gasped. He looked at her with cold, dark eyes. "You wore the uniform. You entered the station. You passed every checkpoint." He paused, letting the horror sink in. "You are the door." Before she could scream, heavy footsteps thundered outside, followed by the terrifying sound of gunshots and screams filling the station. "You used me."
The realization crushed her. The messages, the woman in the photo, she was never the point. She was just the bait to move Lena into position. Lena hadn't been framed. She had chosen every step herself. Suddenly, a team of officers stormed in, guns raised. But they weren't aiming at the Mafia boss. They were aiming at her. Lena looked at the security screens on the wall and saw what they saw. Footage of her, alone, opening every restricted door and clearing the way for the massacre. There was no sign of the boss anywhere on the cameras. He stepped back into the shadows, already fading away. "No one will ever see me," he whispered.
The tragedy of Officer Lena serves as a cautionary tale about the illusion of control and the high cost of a single compromise. Lena's downfall was not a sudden act of evil, but a slow erosion of her principles, triggered by the belief that she could outmaneuver a master manipulator. The story illustrates that a moral line is often like a glass wall. Once it is cracked, it no longer provides protection. Lena spent her career never breaking the law, yet she allowed herself to be blackmailed into a test of lying to her fellow officers. By choosing to lie once to save her reputation, she effectively handed the Mafia boss the keys to her life. The moral lesson is clear. Integrity is an all-or-nothing shield. Once you move even a fraction of an inch to accommodate a threat, you have already surrendered.
Manipulation through perceived choice. The Mafia boss's ultimate victory was making Lena the door. He didn't physically force her to open restricted areas. He manipulated her environment until her own choices led her there. The lesson: we are responsible for the paths we walk, even when the options seem limited. The reality: external pressure is often used as a tool to make us betray our own values. In the end, the story warns that the most dangerous favors are those that look like survival. By trying to protect her future through deception, Lena ensured she had no future at all. The final, cold ending proves that once you justify a small wrong for a supposedly right reason, the enemy no longer needs to fight you. You have already become your own undoing.